Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh or anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat. We got a great show for you guys today because this is officially the final week, technically, without Penguins hockey. On Friday, the Penguins prospects head up to Buffalo to take on the Boston Bruins around noon. And from then on, every week has a Penguins game, or there's the Four Nations face-off and the All-Star game coming up in February. But you get the gist. Hockey is officially back this week. Penguins will be on the ice in an official capacity, so we're excited about that. But one Penguin was off the ice in an official capacity, and that is Sidney Crosby at the NHL Player Media Tour. We'll talk about what he had to say and whether or not he removed doubts that he will sign an extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then speaking of Crosby, he was a little disrespected in the opening Hart Trophy odds from one sportsbook. We'll discuss where he stands going into the season for the MVP. And then a listener question. Do we expect Lars Eller to regress in the 2024-25 season? We'll get to all of that and more. Let's get started. And there's only one place to really get started today, and that's with Sidney Crosby. I mean, we were planning on talking about Sidney Crosby before his comments surfaced from the NHL Player Media Tour, but considering what he had to say and considering he has been the talk of the town when it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins over the past several months, there's nowhere else we could go with our opening segment. Some were starting to get worried. Some were starting to plot where he could go after Pittsburgh, but Crosby shut down any speculation at the media tour, saying, no, I'm pretty optimistic it's going to get done. I mean, I don't know what day specifically, but it's really positive. It hasn't been a difficult process at all. I'm optimistic a deal will get done. Horwat, you saw these comments from Sidney Crosby in Vegas. What were your thoughts?
Immediately just thought, yeah, these are the exact comments I expected, which is I'm confident a deal will get done, and then not much further detail. It's exactly a Sidney Crosby answer for this certain situation of there's the confidence, there's the willingness there to sign the deal. And essentially, it sounds like it's pretty much almost done. It's just a matter of putting the pen to the paper. But again, there's no rush. There is no, I don't know how to put it. There doesn't seem to be any feuding going on. I can't remember all of the correct words that I'm looking to say. It's a little early this morning, but there's no worry here. It is going to get done. It seems like pretty quickly once he gets back to Pittsburgh, and like you mentioned before, can do the whole press conference, can do the whole social bits. And the fact that, he said that there hasn't been any sort of struggle. It's been a smooth process. Kind of makes me giggle, because if that's the case, could we not have done this months ago? But also, I get it. You, like Rob Rossi said a little bit ago, these guys wanted to enjoy their summers. Sid knew that Kyle Dubas had a lot of work to do this summer to try and build the team. So he let him focus on that. And then the fact that there's just been no sort of speed bumps, no roadblocks, just sort of smooth process. That should give everyone confidence that there has been nothing to worry about this whole time. I think, people planted seeds of doubt in their own mind. We don't need to discuss what people have been talking about north of the border, but there hasn't been need to worry in Pittsburgh. There hasn't been. I know people will. I know maybe some, I don't want to say not the PR standpoint stuff, but like the ticket sales stuff. I know people will worry there, but overall there's absolutely nothing to, be concerned about. And even if he went into a season without a deal, he is still under contract, and you have an entire hockey season to, just say, hey, Sid, here's you got a day off. Just throw your name on this paper.
Yeah, I think what this tells me, which is what it has told me the entire time, is that a deal is a foregone conclusion. And I said about a month ago that, this feels like maybe it's, best thing PR-wise to hold off until he's in person. He's at Penguins training camp, and right before the season, you can really invigorate the fan base by saying, hey, Crosby is here to stay. Not that you didn't already know that, but you know it now. And by the way, we have a game in 28 days or whatever it ends up being whenever he signs. But this matched with what Elliot Friedman had to say on 32 Thoughts, the podcast on Friday, where he said, yeah, from what I've heard, and this is obviously paraphrasing, there's been a 2-year deal, there's been a 3-year deal, there's been a 4-year deal, 5, whatever. They've thrown out a bunch of different options for Crosby, and Crosby saying this has been a really positive. This has been not a difficult process at all. Makes it seem like maybe he wasn't expecting the Penguins to come out with a essentially blank check and say, what do you want for your next contract? Because the other thing that Crosby mentioned yesterday at the NHL Player Media Tour is he was asked how long he wants to continue playing, and he said the same thing he said at the end of last season. Well, it's kind of hard to tell whenever it's the end of summer, you've had a couple months off. Yeah, I feel great right now, but how do you feel at the end of each season, and how does that progress every single year, right? He's never going to be at the end of his age 37 season. He doesn't know how that feels now. He's not going to know how he's going to feel at the end of his age 38 season. So he's essentially saying, I want to play each season and see how I feel. See if I enjoy the game as much as I do now, because he said he's excited for his 20th season. So the fact that they came out with, well, you can sign a 2-year deal, you can sign a 3-year deal, you can sign a 5-year deal, whatever you want, Sid, you're going to get from the Penguins. The fact that that is essentially what Friedman had to say on Friday on 32 Thoughts, maybe Crosby was like, all right, can you give me some time to think about it? Because I just thought this was going to be this is what we want to give you, and I'd be cool with it. But giving him those options, does he want to commit to 5 years? Does he want to commit to 3 years? Does he want to commit to 2? Maybe that's what has taken a little bit longer, not to mention the fact that, as Rob Rossi of The Athletic has reported this entire time, it is summer, and they felt good enough about this that, hey, he can come back in training camp and they can get this done really quickly. Mm-hmm. So just enjoy your summer, Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, that's possible. A couple things came to mind as you were, listing all those things off. First off is, I believe I saw as Pagnotta said that the AAV is likely going to be above 8.7, which I think was also expected.
Yeah, 100%. The guy's been underpaid for his entire career, 19 years.
19 years, yeah. And whatever he gets paid will likely still be an underpayment. So
correct.
You can expect the deal to likely go over that 8.7. I don't know if he'll become the highest paid player on the team. Yeah, I don't know if it cracks 10 like Erik Karlsson's making, but we shall see. We'll go on from there. There's a lot of space to work with the salary cap right now, and with it increasing in the next few years. So there's a lot of wiggle room. But another thing that comes to mind is if this, and this is me spitballing here, if he's that, I don't know, I don't want to say he's uncertain about how many years he can play, but would Sid be the kind of player that, I think it's LeBron that does it, just takes 1-year deals at a time and just sees how he feels at the end of each season? Is it even LeBron? Am I making that up? But
no,
you get what
LeBron did that for a while, where it was like, hey, I'm going to sign 2 years and we'll see. I'm going to sign 2 years, then we'll see. But I don't think Sid's the type of player that wants to do that, because he wants to finish like LeBron does it. So if he's in a situation where he can't win a championship or he can't make the playoffs, he can go somewhere else. Or if there's somewhere else that's a better opportunity, he can go somewhere else. Crosby's not going anywhere else, right? Correct. I think this kind of illustrates that, considering what he said yesterday. I feel like Crosby wants to probably put an end to this, sign his contract and say that's going to be my last contract, but he also doesn't want to sign a 5-year deal, because this is a guy that cares about the Penguins organization. He doesn't want to sign a 5-year deal and then 2 years later be like, I got to retire and you guys have to eat that salary cap for 3 years. And you still have to have that potentially Pavel Datsyuk thing where you trade him to a team, even though he's not going to do that. You can't do that if he's retired. Never mind. Scrap what I was about to say.
I get what you're saying, and that's also kind of why in my head, I think, at least for the veteran players of Crosby's status, or I mean, I know Ovechkin signed long-term, but or of Ovechkin's status, where they are this good, teams will bring them on. The team that they are on will keep them around.
Yeah.
And essentially make it it's a verbal agreement. I'm going to be here my whole career. But like officially on the books, it's going to be 1 year at a time to make sure that I feel good to play another season. Yeah. It's a wild concept. It's actually not that wild. It makes a ton of sense when I think about it. That I'm surprised more players don't do something like that. But also, I get it. I just think it would be an interesting thing for if anyone in the NHL was to do it, it'd be a guy like Crosby, because everyone in Pittsburgh knows he's not going anywhere. There's probably already plenty of handshake and verbal agreements. He's not going anywhere. Then, like you mentioned, why risk the long-term deal if he's had an injury history? He's been really healthy the last few seasons, but something bad happens, and now he's got 4 years left. It's just, in my head, makes a lot of sense to do 1 year at a time, handshake agreements, and go from there. But I get it. He's going to sign. I think the early projection was what, like 3 years, 10 mil? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm still thinking that it's probably going to come in at 3 years, 10.87. That's just my assumption. That's what I'm thinking.
Friedman did say 8.7 will be in there somewhere.
Yeah, 10.87 seems like it's a fair payment, and still, like you mentioned, an underpayment for what he's probably going to provide the Penguins this year. Let's move over and talk a little bit about some Hart Trophy odds. It still has to pertain to Sidney Crosby because, of course, when we talk Hart Trophy, there's only one player on the Penguins that we're talking about. But the Penguins enter this year with probably the lowest expectations of the Crosby era. I think that's fair to say. Most are not picking them to make the playoffs. But what are the expectations for Crosby in the national eye? Well, according to Bet Online, not very much. I looked at some of the other sportsbooks as well. They only have like top 10, top 15 in the Hart Trophy odds, and Crosby was nowhere to be found. And it took me getting to Bet Online to find where Sidney Crosby's odds are. As of right now, Sidney Crosby has the 25th highest odds at plus 12,500 to win the Hart Trophy. So if you're a betting person and you want to put a little bit of money on Sidney Crosby, you bet $100, you win 12,500. You bet more, obviously you can do the math. I'm not doing it. I'm not your personal calculator. But he's behind a couple of interesting names. He's behind, as you mentioned, Connor Bedard of the Chicago Blackhawks. That one's not overly crazy to me. But he's also behind Tage Thompson of the Buffalo Sabres. He's behind Mitch Marner of the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Interesting that there are 3 players on the same team that are above Sidney Crosby. That one doesn't quite make sense to me. But he's also behind Igor Shesterkin and Andrei Vasilevsky. Horwat, I told you before the show, the last goaltenders, the only 2 goaltenders to win the league MVP in the National Hockey League in the 21st century, Carey Price in 2015 and Jose Theodore in 2002. And yet there are 2 goaltenders that have higher odds than Sidney Crosby to win the Hart Trophy this year. What did you make of these odds? Because when I saw them, I mean, we had a couple of laughs texting back and forth about who's ahead of him, where he sits. But what were your thoughts when you saw that Sidney Crosby sits at 25th in Hart Trophy odds to start this season?
I kind of get it at first, but then it's like there's a lot of good players in the league right now. It's when you start looking at the names that are ahead of him that you start to ask questions. Mind you, you mentioned 2 goalies. He also has the same odds as a third, if you wanted to count Connor Hellebuck in there.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is why I don't understand sports betting. This is why I don't do it. It's fascinating stuff to discuss, though, and fascinating stuff to look at and see how these sports books think the season's going to play out, essentially. If you really consider it and think about it, this is the way Bet Online ranks the best players in the league, essentially. Putting Crosby way down at 25 is criminal almost. So I mean, sure, Igor Shesterkin is good enough to be an MVP caliber goalie, but that's just not the way the cookie crumbles in the NHL. And for the last 2 seasons, at his, I don't want to say advanced age, but as he's aged, Sidney Crosby has done things that, at least early in the year, has forced his way into that MVP conversation. And last season, it lasted a lot longer than I think many expected. But, I mean, no, we're not expecting him to win the MVP, but 25 does feel a bit disrespectful and a bit wrong. And, hey, if you think Sid's got that sort of talent left in him and you want to make a ton of money, by all means. You just won't be making that money. But, yeah, it's a little low, is it not?
Yeah, no, it is certainly low. And here's the thing that I look at, because obviously, do I expect him to win the Hart Trophy? No. Do I expect him to be in consideration for the Hart Trophy? To a certain extent, yes. And I think the path is very clear and obvious for Sidney Crosby just to get into consideration, just to get into the conversation. You have to lead a fringe team into the playoffs. If he does that, if the Penguins get back into the playoffs for the first time in 2 seasons, 3 seasons, whatever it is, they've missed 2, then he's automatically going to be the reason that they're there, correct? Like, you have to imagine if they get to the playoffs with this roster, Sidney Crosby is reason number 1. So that should get him in consideration alone. But the other thing that gets him there is the 100-point mark. I know a lot of players right now are scoring at 100 points, and I know the MVP is going to go to whoever breaks that record or whoever scores 100 assists or whoever scores 70, 75 goals, because right now there's a lot of talent in the NHL, and when you look at the favorites, and we'll do that in a second, you can see why they're the favorites, right? They have the potential to go out and make history every single season when they step on the ice. The NHL is just flush with talented players right now. But if he gets 100 points, which is going to be an NHL record for 37-year-olds if he can do it, and they get into the playoffs, there's no way he's not a finalist for the Hart Trophy because it's Sidney Crosby. Voters will recognize that. Voters will automatically gravitate towards that. And unless there is history being made around the NHL apart from Crosby, he's going to be the guy that they say, you know what, it's hard to leave him off the ballot. You know, it's hard to not vote for Sidney Crosby, especially if they're not just sneaking in. If they finish top 3 in the Metropolitan Division, Crosby scores 100 points, which again, not out of the realm of possibility. He has had 90-plus points in the last 2 seasons with a average and then absolutely abysmal power play at his disposal. If they have a slightly better power play and he plays with the lead a little bit more often, which is obviously the goal of the Penguins this year, Crosby can get to 100 points. I'm not saying it's possible. I'm saying there is a more than 40% chance that Sidney Crosby can get to 100 points this year. And if he does that, he has to be in consideration, let alone higher than 25th in consideration for the Hart Trophy.
At least higher than 25th. I mean, age is fickle. We know that those young stars are breaking records, setting records, adding their names to history books.
Mm-hmm.
Sidney Crosby has a chance to do the same thing, and that's where it's going to get interesting. That is where he has a chance to set himself apart as well. He's got 2 healthy seasons under his belt already. He's going to come in with a new contract and with a new fire to bring one more season of success to this team. Mm-hmm. And this would be the time to do it because eventually he will start aging out, we'd assume. And even if he doesn't break 100 points, if he gets a point per game, well, there goes that Gretzky record that is now his.
Yeah, true.
So the voters will be looking at that even if he's able to pull something like that off. From beginning to end, he absolutely has a chance to win that sort of the vibes pick, essentially. The vibes pick for MVP. My other question, too, is does anyone remember what Taylor Hall's odds were going into to his MVP season? They could not have been good, especially playing with the Devils at the time.
Yeah.
It was Taylor Hall. And then he went on to do what he did. I'm not saying, Crosby's odds are, better or worse than Taylor Hall's, but we've seen crazier MVP award winners, haven't we?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd necessarily compare Taylor Hall going into that season to Sidney Crosby as far as stature and national appeal, but I see where you're going with it. I mean, obviously the MVP voters have caught a lot of backlash for that year and going forward. So I don't know if you're going to see that quite again, just because a player is leading a team into the playoffs that weren't expected to. But I think if you add some of these things together, 1, it being Sidney Crosby, 2, the Penguins being a team that haven't made the playoffs the last 2 years and have consistently kind of gone in a downward trajectory. And 3, if he breaks a couple NHL records, it doesn't hurt either. So I think that 25th is crazy. I think that some of the names, Tage Thompson is good. The Buffalo Sabres might be good, but above Crosby going into the season with the opportunity that Crosby has to really put together a MVP type package, I don't see it. So with that, let's close out this segment by looking at the favorites. Because we talked about Crosby, clearly he should be higher than 25th. Clearly, that's a good, a good long shot bet to just stash away in your pocket for the NHL season if you want to throw a little bit on it. Of course, it's your money. You do what you want. And of course, always gamble responsibly. But let's look at the Hart Trophy favorites from BetOnline. Connor McDavid at plus 150 is the favorite. Nathan MacKinnon at plus 550 is second. Austin Matthews is third at plus 800. Those are the last four technically Hart Trophy winners. Then it's Jack Hughes of the New Jersey Devils at plus 1,400. Nikita Kucherov, who also is a Hart Trophy winner, at plus 1,800. And then at sixth, I had to throw him in here, Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov of the Minnesota Wild at sixth at plus 2,000. Horwat, who are you taking out of these six if you had to pick an MVP today on September 10th?
I mean, of these six, they're not making any money. I would have to say Connor McDavid, considering what he did last year, what he's done the year before, and just the way that doesn't seem to be slowing down one modicum. And he's not going into a contract year, but he's going into a year where it's like Sidney Crosby last year. Well, he can sign an extension, that the following offseason. And he just watched his, good buddy, his teammate Leon Draisaitl, going to start making $14 million.
Yeah.
Connor McDavid, I mean, I'm sure he's not driven by money. I'm sure he wants to win, but can absolutely put up the type of season that can earn him the maximum allowable under the CBA, which is 20% of the salary cap.
Yeah.
He could absolutely walk out of the season with, if he wins the Stanley Cup, if he helps that team win the Stanley Cup this year, guaranteed, I bet he's making near whatever that number is. Now, that doesn't go into MVP voting, but that's the type of season he can put up. Something that can earn him, I forget what the number is now, but that 20% of the salary cap and just crush it. So if I had to throw money in it now, I mean, like I said, I'm not making much money, but Connor McDavid seems to be the appropriate answer.
Yeah, that would be a little over $16 million per season. Quick math, obviously at the top of my head, with an $88 million salary cap, which is going to go up again. So that number is going to go up again as well. But when I'm looking at this, I'm going with Nathan MacKinnon. Just as far as who I think will probably win it, I'm going with MacKinnon. I think he's in for, last year he was great, and I felt like nobody talked about him. I feel like he's going to be great again this year, and I think he's going to get that opportunity to be the MVP. But also, sneaky money on Jack Hughes. I have high expectations for the Devils. They redid their defense. They added in a good goaltender. They have two really good goaltenders this year. Jack Hughes is going to be the figurehead of the New Jersey Devils, and if they have the season that I'm expecting them to have, I'd watch out for him in the Hart Trophy market. But that's enough about Hart Trophy. That's enough about teams outside of Pittsburgh. Let's move on and talk a little bit about Lars Eller. And this comes to us from a listener question, which, if you're new to the show, we did this a lot last year, where if you have a question, and we do have our live streams on Wednesdays when the season starts, it is going to be much more consistent. I promise you that, because it's going to be kind of a weekly recap, 3 stars of the week, a check-in on the standings, stuff like that. And we always answer listener questions at the end of those live streams. But if you have a question in the meantime, if you just tag us on Twitter, ask us the question, most times, as long as we're not like jam-packed with news, we're probably going to get to it. So this one comes to us via Twitter, via Duke Marriott on Twitter, saying, quote, "How much will Lars Eller regress this year? Getting flashbacks of Jeff Carter starting strong before falling off." Obviously, I have several comments to make about this, but I'll let you lead things off. Horwat, how do you answer Duke Marriott's question? Let's start with, do you expect a regression from Lars Eller this season?
I mean, I guess technically, because it will be hard for a 35-year-old to sort of maintain that pace that he did. But at the same time, 31 points isn't a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, especially considering he's the third-line center. And you look around at other third-line centers in the league, or at least he was a third-line center, they're putting up more points than that. They just are. So I don't know if regression is the right word. I would say if he does regress, oh boy, get him out of the lineup, because again, 31 should be the bare minimum for someone in his position. I get
no, come on now. He's a fourth line center this year. Like, you have to take into account that he's a fourth line center, and the points aren't going to be as high because, one, he's not going to be playing with as talented of wingers, and 2, he's not going to have as much ice time at 5-on-5.
Yeah, I'm saying that was the baseline last year. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's going to be difficult then to answer, because is it going to be regression if he is getting bumped down the lineup already?
Yeah.
When it comes to it, if he is really showing signs of regression from a new position, yeah, absolutely. Again, get him out of the lineup. That's the way it should be. It's the way it was with Jeff Carter. If he is showing regression in his role, that's enough of that. You can't go much further down than fourth line.
Yeah.
If that's even where he's playing, because you don't know, he could also battle for that battle. Could win that battle for that third line spot, and that's kind of why my brain is acclimating to this whole thing. Also, haven't seen anyone play yet, so
yeah,
we'll see where it rolls. But I would say, 31 points last season was the bare minimum for him. So I don't expect 31 again. So when it comes to regression, perhaps slightly.
Yeah.
But also, it'll be tough to see it if he is on the fourth line.
I don't personally see a regression at all, and I caution people to judge it based on just points, because especially for a guy in Lars Eller's role. Lars Eller, we talked about it last year with Nola Chari. Lars Eller is not in this lineup to bring offense first, right? His primary objective in this lineup is to play defense, is to penalty kill, is to be a steady force in the center of the ice. He did that last year. And oh, by the way, he also scored 31 points and led the Penguins bottom 6 scoring. Can he do that again this year? I don't foresee that happening. I don't think he's going to lead the bottom 6 in scoring, not because he falls off, but because I think the Penguins brought in more offensive upside players to play in the bottom 6. As far as him, I think his play is going to be fine because he was steady last year. Maybe not scoring. Scoring was a little sporadic, but he was steady in his performance and his play. I expect the same thing from Lars Eller this year. And then there's the whole Jeff Carter comparison of it all, which we'll get into now. He is a much different player than Jeff Carter is or was their entire careers, right? Jeff Carter came into this league a sniper, a top 6 forward, a goal-scoring guy that you're going to count on to put in 20-plus goals. Lars Eller was really never that. I mean, I understand early in his career, he had a little bit more of a higher ceiling, but really over the last decade, he has not been that. He has been a defense-first, bottom 6 forward. So there's not really a transition period. Whereas Carter, he came to the Penguins, revitalized his career a little bit, got that extension, and then the wheels fell off. But also, when Carter fell off, he was 38. Lars Eller's 35. That 3 years makes a major difference. And secondly, Jeff Carter had multiple major injuries before coming to Pittsburgh, including back surgeries. Eller doesn't have any of that. So the odds that his legs fall off, the odds that his ability to keep up is going to be less, or is going to be higher than what Jeff Carter was. Jeff Carter fell off, and I understand it scarred a bunch of people. I would steer clear of comparing him and Eller in any sense.
Yeah, I think I would too, because yes, they are two completely different players. Lars Eller has never exceeded 40 points in his career in a season. Starting there. Also, it helped that Jeff Carter came in like a house on fire whenever the Penguins traded for him. Mm-hmm. It helped that he had that still had that ability when he started, and then there was such a fall off whenever it kind of stopped on him, when it all kind of came to an end. Whereas we've only seen Lars Eller for one season so far, and it was fine, right? It was good for his standards, by the way, as I look at it. 31 points is one of his better seasons.
Yeah.
So maybe going down from there, it gets confusing. But it just in general, on the cusp, they're two completely different players, two completely different skill sets. So the comparison shouldn't be there. I see where people come from with it in terms of older forwards in the Penguins organization that might be at the end of their careers. I just... it's tough. I don't think there's a comparison to be made there either. That's kind of why I'm at a bit of a loss here.
Yeah, and it's fair. I understand it. I mean, Jeff Carter was the Penguins' third-line center, and they said, all right, this is the answer at 3C, and then he falls off a cliff. Lars Eller comes in last year. He's your third-line center. A lot of people are saying, hey, this is the best third-line center the Penguins have had in years. And proactively, they brought in different options at third line center to potentially allow him to be a fourth line center, because I think us and a lot of other people last year said simply Lars Eller is probably better as a 4C than he is as a 3C. That's probably a better role for him. So they went out, they got other players that, I mean, he's going to battle, like you mentioned, in camp. Lars Eller, there's a chance that he comes out in camp, is very impressive, and they say, you know what? Start the season at 3C. But I think more so the opportunity is there for him to move down to fourth line center. And a guy like Kevin Hayes probably starts the year as third line center with, again, like I mentioned, a little bit of a higher offensive upside than what Lars Eller can bring. But that doesn't mean I expect Lars Eller to regress. I think maybe his offensive numbers dip a little bit, but that's because the opportunities are going to dip a little bit. I do think that when you look at his play and his level of play, I don't expect much of a regression at all. Let's finish off this show with really just a quick bit of news that happened over the weekend, or on Friday, I believe, is when this stuff came out. And we just haven't had an episode since then, but wanted to send out the shout out. A couple of Penguins headed to their respective Hall of Fames. Matt Cullen and Kevin Stevens will be inducted into the United States Hockey Hall of Fame on December 4th in Pittsburgh. So that's going to be a fun day for the Penguins organization, a fun day for Matt Cullen and Kevin Stevens. They will be the 16th and 17th Penguins to be inducted into the United States Hockey Hall of Fame. Horwat, what is the first thing that comes to mind when I say the names Kevin Stevens and Matt Cullen? And obviously it doesn't have to be together because there's not really much connective tissue other than the Penguins and Stanley Cup championships.
Other than back-to-back cups with the Penguins in their respective eras. Kevin Stevens, I always find it fascinating that his only 100-point seasons came with Mario Lemieux. That shows the power of Lemieux, because, I mean, not that Kevin Stevens wasn't also a great player, but if you look at the penalty minutes, also, he clearly wasn't supposed to be that kind of player. But the pure definition of the grinder, of the, if there's a more specific word that I'm forgetting.
Power forward. The
power forward. Thank you. That was it. The pure definition of the power forward in the NHL. I mean, 111 points, but also 200-something penalty minutes, if I'm remembering the exact line correctly. Might not be. But just that sort of Mario Lemieux protection. He could protect, but also was able to score. Phenomenal stuff, and a heck of a journey through the NHL and just in life. Good for Kevin Stevens for, earning his role, earning his spot in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. Well-deserved honor. Don't know if the Hockey Hall of Fame will come coming, but this is a good place to, just being honest, this is a good
it's supposed to be like a kudos thing. You're like, yeah, I think you capped out there, buddy.
I'm just being honest. But it's an absolutely outstanding achievement for him. And when it comes to Matt Cullen, I mean, nothing much comes to mind too much with Matt Cullen. I think he came in with a cup, so he brought a little bit of that cup pedigree, and then was a huge piece of that depth in when the Penguins' depth was at its best for 16 and 17.
Yeah.
And, was loved by the team, the fans, and the city, all of it. Great stuff. And again, well-deserved honor for Matt Cullen, too. A 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And well-deserved. I forget how many games played he had. It was a ton, though. Yeah.
A lot of games played. When I think Matt Cullen, first thing that comes to mind, dad. That's the first thing that comes to mind, because he was the dad of those 2016 and 17 teams. I think the sad reality is the dad of this year's team is Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby, which is something that you never expected to have to say, but hey, that works. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of Matt Cullen. First thing that comes to mind with Kevin Stevens, I mean, you kind of just summed up his time in Pittsburgh, but for me, it's the skyline from the 1992-93 season. That is still, to this day, considered the best Penguins team of all time, and they didn't win a Stanley Cup. I mean, he played with Lemieux and Yager that year. He scored 55 goals and 111 points, and that wasn't even his career high. His career high came a year prior where he scored 123. But, the fact that you look back in Penguins history, and there's a lot of lines that, are near and dear to Penguins fans' hearts. The skyline, because of, one, how absolutely freak of nature human beings they looked. They're massive humans. And two, because of how unstoppable they were in that 92-93 season, the only President's Trophy season for the Penguins, and a year in which they probably should have three-peated, but we know how that story ended. But, shout out to Kevin Stevens, shout out to Matt Cullen, United States Hockey Hall of Fame. Again, they're going to be inducted on December 4th, which is yours truly's birthday, in Pittsburgh. Just a great honor for those two, and it'll be a great day for the Penguins because, I mean, you look at last year, it's kind of like the Yager jersey ceremony. It's a day where you're going to see a lot of former Penguins in Pittsburgh. It's going to be a nice weekend for the Penguins in total. And that's not it. Also want to give a shout out to Amanda Kessel, who got inducted to the, quote, M Club Hall of Fame of the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. Amanda Kessel, the assistant general manager of the Penguins, currently is a 2-time World Junior gold medalist, a 4-time World Championship gold medalist, an Olympic gold medalist, and a 3-time NCAA champion with the Minnesota Golden Gophers. She played at Minnesota from 2010 to 2013, had a year off in 2014, and went back and finished up in 2015. Gets inducted to the University of Minnesota Hall of Fame. Congratulations to Amanda Kessel, who just continues to have a really good summer, right? Got drafted to the PWHL, decides, hey, I'm going to stay in Pittsburgh because I'm going to get a promotion, which also, shout out, gets a promotion this summer, gets engaged this summer, and now inducted, or to be inducted, I should say, into the Minnesota Hockey, or the M Club of the Minnesota Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and I believe that opportunity is still on the table for her to play in the PWHL if she so pleases, which, if you can spin that dual rule, go for it.
Hey.
It's been a great summer for her. It's another well-deserved honor because she's one of the best women's hockey players that, comes to mind right away. One of the very many phenomenal athletes that women's hockey has produced. She's among the best, and this is, another well-deserved honor for her, and just capping off what was a busy and successful summer for her as well.
Yeah, she's got a lot of gold. She's got a lot of gold. She's got a lot of championships. So congratulations. And obviously, the sky's the limit for her. She has quickly ascended the Penguins organizational ranks, assistant general manager, and also, I believe, manager of the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins as well. That was part of her promotion earlier this summer. So congratulations again to Amanda Kessel, and congratulations to all three, Amanda Kessel, Matt Cullen, and Kevin Stevens, all headed to their respective Hall of Fames. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. It's a busy week. NHL Player Media Tour is still ongoing. Some more stories might be coming from that. We'll have all of it covered for you here at Tip of the Ice-Burgh on YouTube, as well as anywhere you get your podcast from. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. We'll see you guys next time.